She dressed ugly to sabotage her blind date, the Mafia boss. Saw through her disguise and claimed her. Have you ever looked in the mirror and wished you were someone else? Not prettier, not richer, but invisible? For most, beauty is currency. For me, Elena, in that moment, beauty was a prison sentence. An arranged marriage to a man rumored to have a heart made of ice and hands stained with sins. I had one single chance to escape. Make him reject me. Make the monster look at me and run. What I didn't know was that real monsters aren't afraid of the ugly. They fall in love with the chaos. The stench of cheap hairspray filled the small bathroom, a chemical fog that scratched the back of my throat. My hands trembled, not from cold, but from icy adrenaline, as I applied the third layer of foundation. 2 shades too dark for my skin, oily, heavy. The goal wasn't just to look ugly, it was to look sloppy, repulsive. Just 1 more hour, I whispered to the distorted reflection in the stained mirror. You just need to be unbearable for 1 hour. I adjusted the glasses. They were enormous, thick tortoiseshell frames that slid incessantly down my nose, which was now purposefully greasy. The sweater I chose was an insult to both touch and sight. A synthetic mustard yellow wool, covered in pills, that scratched my neck and pricked my arms with every movement. I felt suffocated inside it. Good. The discomfort would help me be cranky. The woman staring back at me wasn't the heiress of the Rossi family. It wasn't beautiful Elena, the bargaining chip in a criminal alliance. It was a walking disaster. A crooked smile, almost victorious, touched my dry lips. No lipstick, just unevenly applied cocoa butter. Dante Moretti, the capo of capos, the man who controlled the city with a snap of his fingers, was expecting a docile princess. He was going to get a nightmare. The restaurant, Loro, smelled of old money and silent judgment. The moment I walked through the massive oak double doors, the hum of conversation ceased for a microsecond. I felt dozens of eyes burning into my back. They weren't looks of desire. They were looks of confusion, of disdain. The sound of my shoes, heavy boots, worn down at the heels, making a hollow, inelegant clack-clack against the polished marble, echoed like a scream in a library. The maitre d', a slender man in a suit that cost more than my car, blocked my path. He didn't speak at first. He just raised an eyebrow, his gaze sweeping over my mustard wool sweater, my shapeless long skirt, and the hair pulled back in a loose, greasy bun. "The service entrance is around the back, miss," he said, his voice low, polished, but cutting like glass. Triumph warmed my chest. It was working. If the staff didn't want me here, imagine the king of the Mafia. "I have a reservation." My voice came out nasal, a detail I had practiced all afternoon. I pushed up the sliding glasses. "Mr. Moretti's table." The name dropped into the air like a grenade. The color drained from the maitre d's face. The disdain in his eyes was instantly replaced by pure, visceral terror. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in a nervous spasm. "Moretti?" he stammered. "Apologies, signorina. This way." Immediately. He didn't look me in the eye again. He guided me through the hall as if I were a bomb about to detonate, clearing a path between the tables with trembling urgency. We reached the most secluded table, in a corner where the lighting was strategically low, golden, intimate. But the chair opposite me was empty. "Mr. Moretti will arrive shortly." The maitre d' bowed exaggeratedly and vanished, as if wanting to put as much distance as possible between us. I sat down. The velvet chair was too soft, a luxurious embrace that contrasted with the roughness of my clothes. Time dragged on. 5 minutes. 10. I started tapping my fingernails on the table. I chewed on a loose piece of skin on my finger, making a point to look anxious and vulgar. Then, it happened. It wasn't a sound. It was a shift in air pressure. The restaurant, which had maintained a steady hum of silverware and muffled chatter, went silent. Completely. Even the clinking of glasses stopped. It was as if someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. A cold shiver raced up my spine. ignoring the thick wool of the sweater. My body reacted before my mind could, the prey instinct alerting that the predator had entered the clearing. I looked up, adjusting the heavy glasses. He was there. Dante Moretti. The photos in the newspapers didn't do justice to the aura he projected. He was tall, imposing, occupying space with an authority that needed no words. The black suit, bespoke tailored, hugged broad shoulders and a military posture. But what paralyzed my lungs was his face. Hard lines, carved from granite. A 5 o'clock shadow, dark and precise, shading a locked jaw. And the eyes. God. The eyes. They were dark, black abysses that seemed to absorb the light around them. And they were locked on me. He walked to the table. Every step was deliberate, silent, lethal. The world around him seemed to fade. Only he and the gravity he exerted existed. Be repulsive, Elena. Be his nightmare. My mind screamed, trying to overcome the panic that made my heart hammer against my ribs. He stopped in front of the table. He looked down. I waited for the disgust. I waited for the wrinkled nose, the look of scorn the maitre d' had given me, the immediate turning of his back. Go away, I begged mentally. Go away and tell my father I am an embarrassment. Dante didn't move. He tilted his head slightly to the side, like a wolf analyzing a curious creature he had just found in the forest. The silence stretched, taut, ready to snap. Then, he pulled out the chair. The sound of wood scraping lightly on the carpet was deafening. He sat down. Elena. His voice was gravel, a deep vibration I felt in my stomach more than I heard with my ears. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. You're late, I snapped, wiping my nose with the back of my hand on purpose. I made an unpleasant sniffing sound. I hate waiting. I have more important things to do, you know? Like organizing my rock collection. The insult hung in the air. Speaking like that to a capo was, theoretically, suicide. Dante blinked. Slowly. And then, the impossible happened. The hard line of his mouth curved. Not in a sneer, but in a small, almost imperceptible smile that softened the corners of his eyes. Rock collection? He repeated, his voice tinged with amusement? Fascinating. I froze. He was supposed to be annoyed. Yeah, I insisted, crossing my arms, the wool scratching my wrists. Rocks, lint, and dust. I'm very busy. So if we can just get this over with. I know you don't want to be here. Look at me. I pointed to my own face, to the oily makeup, to the crooked glasses. Clearly I'm not what you ordered from the trophy wife catalog. Dante leaned back in his chair. He looked relaxed, comfortable, as if he were watching his favorite movie. The waiter, he said, completely ignoring my self-deprecating speech. He raised 2 fingers. Immediately a waiter appeared out of nowhere, visibly trembling. Yes, Don Moretti. The young lady looks cold, Dante said. His tone was casual, but there was steel underneath. She is shivering. Bring the most full-bodied wine we have, and turn up the temperature of the air conditioning in this zone, now. But sir, the waiter looked at my thick wool sweater, confused. I was sweating, not cold. The thermostat is central. Dante turned his face to the waiter. The movement was slow. The look he cast at the man was terrifying. It was the look of someone who decided who lived and who died before breakfast. Did I stutter? The waiter paled so much he looked transparent. No, sir. Immediately, sir. And he ran. I turned my gaze back to Dante, stunned. He had just threatened an employee to turn up the heat. For me? I'm not cold, I grumbled, pulling at the collar of the sweater that was suffocating me. I'm hot. This wool is horrible. Then take it off, he suggested, his eyes fixed on mine. There was a glint there. Intelligence. He was seeing something. No. I crossed my arms tighter. It's my lucky sweater. Lucky sweater, he repeated, the flavor of the word rolling off his tongue. He rested his elbows on the table, invading my personal space. His scent hit me full force. Sandalwood, expensive leather, and something metallic, dangerous and addictive. And what do you need luck for, Elena? To hide? My heart stopped for a second. I don't know what you're talking about. He reached out. I froze. His hand was large, long fingers, calloused palms, but with impeccably manicured nails. He moved his hand toward my face. I wanted to recoil, but my body betrayed my brain. I stayed motionless. His fingers, warm and rough, touched the frame of my ridiculous glasses. With a delicacy I didn't think possible in a man of that size, he pushed the glasses up, adjusting them on my nose. The touch grazed my skin. It was like an electric shock. A hot shiver went down to the tips of my toes. Your glasses were slipping, he whispered. His voice was dark velvet. It would be a shame to hide those eyes. I blinked, confused. My eyes were mascara-free, surrounded by dark circles drawn with purple eyeshadow. My eyes? My voice came out shaky, betraying my nervousness. They are ordinary. No, he disagreed. And for the first time, I saw the full intensity of his obsession born. There was no disgust. There was no pity. There was hunger. A contained, patient hunger. They are defiant. He leaned back again, picking up the menu without looking away from me. You can order whatever you want, Piccola. He opened the leather menu. But I suggest you stop trying to scare me. I live with killers, traitors, and thieves every day. He lowered the menu just enough for his black eyes to trap mine again. A beautiful woman dressed in her grandmother's clothes is the most refreshing thing I've seen in 10 years. The air vanished from my lungs. He knew. Not only did he know, he was enjoying it. I'm not beautiful, I insisted, desperate, gripping the edge of the table. I'm a disaster. I chew with my mouth open, I snore. Dante let out a low, husky laugh. The sound was so unexpected, so genuinely masculine and sexy, that I felt my legs go weak under the table. You can try all you want, Elena, he said, closing the menu with a soft thud. You worked so hard to build this fortress of ugliness, but you made a mistake. What mistake? I asked, breathless. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to an intimate secret, just for the two of us in the middle of that crowded restaurant. You forgot that rough diamonds still shine in the dark. He brought the water glass to his lips, drinking slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. And I am a very greedy man. I never leave a diamond behind. I felt panic rise, mixed with a new emotion, hot and dangerous, that I didn't want to name. Attraction. I came here to make him run. Instead, I had just woken the dragon, and he didn't seem to want to devour me. He seemed to want to keep me in his hoard. You're going to regret this, I threatened, with no strength in my voice. I doubt it, he replied, and picked up a linen napkin, extending it to me. Your forehead is sweaty, mio amore. May I? Before I could answer, he leaned in and with devastating tenderness, wiped the bead of fake sweat from my temple. The gesture was possessive. Careful. I was lost. The monster wasn't a monster. He was something much worse. He was the man who saw right through me, and he wasn't going to let me go. Dinner arrived like a death sentence served on fine porcelain. I had ordered the most difficult, messy, and inelegant dish on the menu, spaghetti al nero di seppia, squid ink pasta. It was a military strategy disguised as a meal. The black ink would stain my teeth, my lips, and with any luck, it would splatter onto my hideous mustard sweater, creating a masterpiece of chaos. When the waiter deposited the steaming plate in front of me, the scent of the sea and garlic rose up, intense and pungent. I looked at James. He had a rare steak before him, cooked to bloody perfection, but he wasn't eating. He was watching me. He held his glass of red wine by the stem, swirling the liquid in a hypnotic rhythm. The dark ruby of the wine caught the dim light of the restaurant, reflecting the predatory glint in his eyes. Buon appetito, Mia, he murmured. The way he said my name, savoring every vowel, made my stomach turn in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. I grabbed my fork like it was a shovel. I twirled an obscene amount of pasta, ensuring thick black strands hung down, dripping dark sauce. "Thanks," I said with my mouth full, chewing noisily. I waited for the recoil. I waited for him to look away, embarrassed by the uncouth creature he was stuck with. James simply brought the glass to his lips, hiding a smile. He wasn't disgusted. He looked like he was watching a private show where only he understood the punchline. "You eat with passion," he commented, setting the glass down. "I like that. Most women they bring here eat like frightened birds. You eat as if it's your last meal." I choked. I coughed, bringing my hand to my mouth, which was now stained with ink. "Maybe it is," I retorted, chugging water loudly. "They say marrying you is the end of life, isn't it?" Silence fell over the table again. I had touched a nerve. His reputation. The Butcher of Naples. That's what the newspapers called him when they thought no one was listening. James didn't blink. His expression hardened, but not at me. He looked at nothing for a second, and a shadow passed over his face. The solitude of absolute power. "Life ends in many ways, Piccola," he said, his voice low, vibrating through the table and resonating in my bones. "Sometimes, it ends when you try to be someone you're not just to please others. With me," he leaned forward, invading my space again. "With me, you would never need to pretend." My heart skipped a beat. He was dismantling my defenses, brick by brick, without even raising his voice. I continued eating, but the food had lost its taste. I felt exposed. The wool of the sweater seemed to weigh a ton, scratching against my neck. When we finished, or rather, when I gave up trying to scare him off with my lack of table manners, he signaled for the check. He didn't even look at the total. He just tossed a matte black card onto the silver tray. "Let's go," he ordered, standing up. His height was overwhelming close up. I stood up too fast. My heavy boots caught on the leg of the table. It wasn't theater. It was pure clumsiness. I stumbled, my arms windmills in the air, about to faceplant onto the marble floor and complete my humiliation. But I never hit the ground. An arm of iron wrapped around my waist. The impact was solid, firm. I was pulled against a chest as hard as a concrete wall. His scent enveloped me completely now. It was intoxicating, a mix of sandalwood, expensive tobacco, and that metallic tang of danger. For a second, I was just a rag doll in his arms. "Careful," he whispered near my ear. His breath hit my sensitive skin, making the fine hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "I've got you." He didn't let go immediately. He held me there, pressed against him, stabilizing my balance, but also testing. Feeling? I'm clumsy, I stammered, trying to pull away, but his hands were firm. "I noticed," he said, and there was that dark amusement in his voice again. He released me slowly, as if reluctant to let go. We walked toward the exit. I felt dizzy. In the entrance hall, while we waited for the valet, a couple passed us. The woman was stunning, a red silk dress that clung to her like a second skin, diamonds dripping from her ears, perfect hair, the exact opposite of me. She looked at James with undisguised desire. Then, her gaze slid to me. Her smile transformed into a grimace of scorn. She nudged her partner and whispered something loud enough to be heard. "Mio Dio, what is the great Moretti doing with the cleaning lady? Must be hard times for the Mafia." Her giggle was high-pitched, cruel. I shrugged, used to it. This was exactly what I wanted, wasn't it? For the world to see that I wasn't fit for him. But then, the air froze. James stopped. He let go of my hand, which he had taken to guide me, I realized with a delay, and turned his body slowly toward the couple. The shift was terrifying. The seductive, amused man from dinner vanished. In his place stood the Don, death in an Armani suit. The woman's partner paled instantly, recognizing who was standing in front of him. "Mr. Moretti," the man began, his voice trembling, James ignored the man. He focused his black eyes on the woman in red. She stopped laughing. The smile died on her lips, replaced by a fear that made her knees visibly shake. "Apologize," James said. His voice wasn't loud. It was calm. A terrible calm, like the sea before a tsunami. "What?" the woman stammered. "You insulted my companion." James took a step forward. His shadow seemed to swallow the couple. "You insulted the future Mrs. Moretti, and by extension, you insulted me." The silence in the hall was absolute. Even the valets didn't dare breathe. I didn't know." She started to tear up. "Apologies," James repeated. "Now, or I will ensure you never enter an establishment in the city again without tasting fear." "I'm sorry," she cried out, almost hysterical, looking at me. "I'm sorry, Signora. It was a mistake. I'm an idiot." I was paralyzed. No one had ever defended me like this. My father would have laughed along with her. My ex-fiancé would have agreed. James held her gaze for another torturous second, then turned to me. The coldness vanished from his eyes instantly, replaced by a soft concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, completely ignoring the couple fleeing into the night. "You didn't have to do that," I whispered. She was right. I look like a cleaning lady. James brought his hand to my chin, tilting my face up so I was forced to face him. "You look like the only real thing in this place, Mia." His thumb caressed my jawline, grazing the skin where I hadn't applied the oily foundation. "And no one disrespects what is mine." What is mine? The possession in his voice was heavy, absolute. And God help me, a traitorous part of me liked it. His car arrived. A black SUV, armored, enormous. The valet opened the door with reverence. I got in. The interior smelled of new leather and safety. The world outside, the cold, the judgments, disappeared as the heavy door closed, isolating the sound of the street. James got in on the other side. The space felt too small for him. His long legs brushed against mine. "To the Rossi residence?" he ordered the driver, and the partition glass between us and the front of the car rose with a soft hum. We were alone, in a moving cubicle of luxury. I took off my fogged-up glasses and wiped them on the wool of my sweater, trying to buy time. "You know this isn't going to work," I began, my voice sounding small in the darkness of the car. The city lights streaked through the tinted windows, creating bands of light and shadow on his face. "What?" he asked, relaxing into the leather seat, watching me. "Us." I pointed to him and then to me. "You are you, and I am this. I don't know how to be a Mafia wife, James. I don't know how to throw parties. I don't know how to keep my mouth shut, and I definitely don't know how to dress to impress your associates." James let out a sigh, a tired sound. He loosened his tie, pulling the silk knot with a fluid gesture that exposed his strong throat. "Do you think I need a hostess?" he asked, turning his head to look at me. "I have employees for that. Do you think I need someone to impress my associates? They already fear me. That is enough. Then what do you want?" The question came out as a desperate whisper. "Why didn't you give up when you saw me?" He moved. Fast. In one instant, he was on the other side of the seat, and in the next, he was leaning over me, not touching me, but caging me. His hands rested on the leather on either side of my head, trapping me in his orbit. I felt his heat radiate, the smell of whiskey and danger. "Because I investigated you, Mia Rossi," he confessed, his voice husky, dangerously close to my lips. My eyes widened. "What? I know you graduated in art history with honors, but your father forbade you to work." He listed the facts, each one bringing his face a centimeter closer to mine. "I know you sneak out of the house at night to feed stray cats at the docks, in an area where even my men don't like to go alone. I know you hate injustice more than you hate yourself." Tears pricked my eyes. He knew. He saw me. "And I know," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that vibrated down my spine, "that you are wearing this disguise because you think freedom is more important than power." He reached up, and with infinite care, pulled a pin from my messy bun. My brown hair, heavy and silky, tumbled down over my shoulders, freeing itself from the oily constraint. "You are a rebel, Mia." He wound a strand of my hair around his finger. "And I am tired of women who only say yes. I want the fire. I want the fight." I could barely breathe. The tension in the car was electric. Every nerve in my body was screaming to kiss him or run. I didn't know which impulse was stronger. "I will make your life hell," I warned, my voice trembling. James smiled. That wolfish smile, predatory and possessive. "I already live in hell, amore." He pulled away slowly, returning to his side of the seat, but leaving the burn of his presence on my skin. Maybe it's time I had a queen to rule it with me. The car came to a gentle stop. We had arrived. The gates of my father's mansion were opening. The driver opened the door for me. The cold night air rushed in, breaking the bubble of heat and intimacy. I got out of the car, my legs feeling like jelly. "Mia," James called out. I turned. He didn't get out of the car. He sat in the shadows, only his eyes glinting. "The sweater," he said. I looked down at the hideous mustard wool. "What about it?" "Burn it," he ordered softly. "Not because it's ugly, but because it scratches your skin, and I don't like seeing your skin irritated." He signaled the driver. The door closed. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the red taillights of the SUV disappear into the night. I touched my face, where he had wiped the sweat, where he had adjusted my glasses. My skin tingled. I had worn armor to repel a monster, but the monster had seen the woman underneath. And worse, he had decided to protect her. I walked into the house, and for the first time in years, I looked in the hall mirror, hair down, lips swollen from biting them in nervousness, eyes shining with a new life. I was in danger. The sweetest, most terrible danger in the world. The sound of the doorbell didn't just ring. It echoed through the hollow hallways of the Rossi mansion, like a gavel striking a judge's desk. It was 10 now a.m. on a Saturday. I was still in my pajamas, an oversized, faded t-shirt that had seen better decades and flannel pants with a hole in the knee. I had planned to spend the day sulking, perhaps planning a second attempt at sabotage. Maybe I could fake a contagious skin disease, or start speaking in tongues. "Mia!" My father's voice boomed from the foyer, laced with a panic that only one man could inspire. "Get down here! Now!" I dragged myself out of bed. I didn't bother brushing my hair. If James Moretti was here, he deserved to see the reality of his investment. The mess. The apathy. I walked down the grand staircase, my bare feet silent on the cold marble. The foyer was crowded. My father stood there, wringing his hands, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. Next to him was my stepmother, nervously adjusting her pearls. And in the center of the room, sucking all the air out of the space, was James. He wasn't in a suit today. He was wearing casual clothes, dark jeans that fit his muscular thighs with criminal perfection, a black t-shirt that clung to his chest, and a leather jacket that looked like it had seen wars. He looked younger, more dangerous, and infinitely more attractive. He was flanked by two men, giant, silent sentinels with earpieces who scanned the room for threats. James looked up as I descended. His dark eyes locked onto mine. He didn't look at my father. He didn't look at the expensive art on the walls. He looked at my messy hair, my old t-shirt, my bare feet, and he smirked. "Good morning, Piccola," he said. His voice was a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards and up into my soles. "You're early," I said flatly, stopping on the last step. "I haven't had my coffee. I'm not pleasant before coffee." My father gasped. "Mia, apologize immediately. Don Moretti is—" James raised a hand, one finger. My father silenced himself instantly, the words dying in his throat. The power dynamic was brutal and immediate. In this house, my father was the tyrant. But in the world, James was the god. She doesn't need to apologize, James said, walking toward me. He stopped at the base of the stairs, forcing me to look up at him. And I brought coffee. He gestured to one of his guards, who stepped forward with a cardboard carrier holding 2 steaming cups and a brown paper bag that smelled like heaven. Fresh pastries. I blinked. You brought coffee? Black, 2 sugars, and a sfogliatella. James recited my order perfectly. I told you, Mia. I do my research. He took the cup and extended it to me. I hesitated. Taking it felt like accepting a bribe. It felt like surrender. But the smell of the roasted beans was hypnotic. I took the cup. Our fingers brushed. The spark was there again. That annoying, traitorous jolt of electricity that made my heart stutter. Go get dressed, he commanded softly, taking a sip of his own coffee while watching me over the rim of the cup. I'm not going anywhere, I argued, clutching the warm cup like a shield. It's Saturday. My schedule involves staring at the wall and regretting my life choices. James chuckled. It was a low, dark sound. Cancel your appointments with the wall. We have work to do. Work. You tried to dress yourself last night, he said, his eyes gleaming with mockery. It was inventive. But today, I'm dressing you. I am not a doll, James. No, he agreed, his face turning serious. He stepped closer, invading my personal space until all I could see was the sharp line of his jaw and the depth of his eyes. You are the future queen of this city, and you will look the part. 10 minutes, Mia, or I'll carry you out in your pajamas, and I promise you, I will enjoy that far more than you will. 20 minutes later, I took my time just to annoy him. We were in the back of his SUV. I had put on jeans and a sweater, my actual clothes this time, not a costume. I looked normal, boring, invisible. James was on his phone, speaking in rapid, aggressive Italian. I caught words like shipment, dock, and blood. He was organizing a criminal empire while I finished my pastry. The contrast was absurd. He hung up and looked at me. The switch was instantaneous. The ruthless Don vanished, replaced by the intense, observant man who seemed fascinated by the crumbs on my lip. Better, he noted, looking at my clothes. But still hiding. Comfort is not hiding, I defended. Baggy gray cotton is hiding, he corrected. You wear clothes like armor, Mia. You think if you look plain enough, no one will target you. No one will hurt you. I looked out the window, watching the city blur by. It worked for 24 years. It worked because you were irrelevant, he said brutally. You are not irrelevant anymore. You are mine. The car slowed down. We weren't in the commercial district. We were on Via dei Mille, the most exclusive street in the city. The kind of place where price tags didn't exist, because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. The car stopped in front of a sleek minimalist boutique with no name on the door, just a golden handle. Wait, I panicked slightly. This place? You need an appointment 6 months in advance just to breathe the air in there. I don't make appointments, James said simply, unbuckling his seatbelt. I make phone calls. The moment we stepped onto the sidewalk, the door opened. The manager, a woman with a severe bob cut and impeccable posture, was waiting. She looked terrified. Don Moretti. She bowed her head. Welcome. The store is yours. We have cleared the other clients. I froze. He had closed down the most expensive store in the city? For me? James placed a hand on the small of my back. It was possessive, warm, and guiding. He pushed me gently inside. After you, Tesoro. The interior smelled of lavender and money. Racks of silk, velvet, and cashmere lined the walls. It was a temple of fashion, and I felt like a heretic. I don't belong here, I whispered to James as the manager scurried off to fetch champagne. You are the only one who belongs here, he murmured near my ear. Everything else is just fabric. You are the life. He sat on a plush leather sofa in the center of the room, spreading his legs comfortably, claiming the space as his throne. Bring everything, he told the staff. The winter collection, the evening gowns, and the red one in the window. The next hour was a blur of torture and luxury. I was shoved into changing rooms, draped in fabrics that cost more than my college tuition. I tried on a blue dress. Too docile, James critiqued from the sofa, sipping champagne. Next, I tried a floral print. Too innocent. You're not a flower, Mia. You're a storm. Next, I was getting frustrated. I came out wearing a black pantsuit, sharp, tailored, severe. James paused. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His eyes traveled up my legs, over my hips, lingering on the V neckline. Better, he growled. But it's business. I want danger. The manager returned with the dress. The red one. It was a slip dress made of heavy silk, the color of fresh arterial blood. Thin straps. A cowl neck. A slit that went up to my thigh. I can't wear this, I told the assistant in the dressing room. It's too much. It shows everything. It's magnificent, Signorina, the assistant whispered, awestruck. Please. For him. I took a deep breath. Why did I care what he thought? I hated him. I hated this arrangement. But when I looked in the mirror, the woman staring back wasn't the sad, invisible girl. She was powerful. The red ignited my skin. The cut highlighted curves I didn't know I had. I stepped out. The boutique went silent. James was looking at his phone. He sensed the silence and looked up. His phone slipped from his hand. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. He didn't notice. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He just stared. His pupils dilated until his eyes were almost entirely black. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a sexual tension so thick it felt like smoke. He stood up. Slowly, like a predator stalking prey that had finally stopped running. He walked toward me. The shop assistants evaporated into the background, sensing they needed to disappear. James stopped inches from me. He didn't touch me. Not yet. He just let his eyes devour me, tracing the line of the silk over my hips, the dip of my waist, the swell of my chest. I was wrong, he said, his voice a rough rasp. It's too ugly, I asked, my voice trembling. No. He shook his head, looking almost angry. I was wrong to think I could handle this. Handle what? You, he whispered. In red. He reached out. His knuckles grazed my bare shoulder. My skin burned under his touch. He traced the thin strap of the dress with a finger, as if testing its strength, as if wondering how easy it would be to snap it. This dress, he murmured, his gaze locking onto mine, intense and scorching. It is a weapon, Mia. You could start a war wearing this. Maybe I want to start a war, I breathed, surprised by my own boldness. The dress was doing something to me. His gaze was doing something to me. James smiled, a wicked, satisfied smile. Good, he said, because I love a good fight. He moved behind me. I watched us in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. Him, dark, towering, lethal in his leather and denim. Me, burning in red silk, looking like the sinner he wanted me to be. He placed both hands on my shoulders, his grip heavy, grounding. He leaned down, his lips brushing the sensitive skin below my ear. I shivered, my eyes fluttering closed. Look at the mirror, he commanded. I opened my eyes. Tell me what you see, he demanded. I see a fraud, I whispered, the old insecurity clawing back. A girl playing dress-up. Liar, he growled, his hands tightening slightly. Look closer. I see a queen. I see the only woman in this city with the spine to stand up to me. I see my wife. I'm not your wife yet. Paperwork, he dismissed. You were mine the moment you walked into that restaurant looking like a disaster. You think I fell for the dress? No. I fell for the woman who had the guts to wear it. He moved his hands down my arms, a slow, friction-heavy caress that made my knees weak. Take it, he said to the reflection. Own it. This beauty. It is yours. It is not for your father to sell. It is not for society to judge. It is yours to wield, and I am just the man lucky enough to hold the weapon. Tears pricked my eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelm. He was giving me something I never had. Agency. Power. He wasn't telling me to be pretty for him. He was telling me to be dangerous for myself. We'll take it, he announced to the room, stepping away from me, leaving my back cold from the loss of his heat. The manager rushed forward. Excellent choice, Don Moretti. Shall I wrap it? No, James said, his eyes still on me. She wears it out. What? I turned to him. James, it's 11 a.m. on a Saturday. We're going to, I don't know, lunch? In a gala dress? We are going to headquarters, he said, checking his watch. I have a meeting with my capos, and I want them to see you. Like this? Exactly like this. He walked over to me, offering his arm. I want them to understand exactly why I am about to change the rules of the game. Change the rules? I asked, taking his arm. The leather of his jacket was cool against my skin, but his muscle underneath was hard as rock. I'm not just marrying you for the alliance, Mia, he confessed as he led me to the door. I'm restructuring the family, and you are going to be the symbol of the new era. And if they stare? I asked, feeling a fluttering in my stomach that was equal parts fear and excitement. James pushed the door open, the sunlight hitting us. He put on his sunglasses, looking every inch the untouchable king. If they stare with respect, they live, he said casually, as if discussing the weather. If they stare with anything else, well, I always carry an extra clip. He opened the car door for me. Get in, Regina, Queen. Your kingdom awaits. I slid into the car, the silk pooling around me. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. The girl who wanted to be invisible was gone. In her place was a woman in red, sitting next to the devil. And for the first time in her life, she didn't want to run away. She wanted to see what happened next. The headquarters of the Moretti crime family was not a dark, smoke-filled basement behind a pizza parlor. That was a cliché for movies. The reality was far colder, far sharper, and infinitely more intimidating. It was a skyscraper of glass and steel that pierced the Naples skyline, a monolith of legitimate business that hid the rot within its foundation. When the SUV stopped at the private underground entrance, the air changed. The luxury of the boutique, the scent of lavender and champagne, felt like a distant memory. Here the air smelled of exhaust fumes, damp concrete, and quiet, terrifying efficiency. My heart hammered against the silk of the red dress. I felt naked. Not because of the skin the dress exposed, though the slit up my thigh was daring enough to make a nun blush, but because I was entering the belly of the beast without my armor. No baggy sweater, no glasses, no mask of ugliness. Just me, Mia, wrapped in the color of sin. James stepped out first. He adjusted his leather jacket, the movement causing a flicker of light to catch the metallic object tucked into his waistband. A gun. A reminder that the man who had just affectionately touched my hair was also a man who ended lives. He offered me his hand. Ready? He asked. His voice was different here. Harder. It echoed off the concrete walls of the garage. No, I admitted, my voice small. Good, he replied, his fingers closing around mine, a warm, rough clamp that anchored me to the earth. Complacency gets you killed. Fear keeps you sharp. He pulled me out of the car. The draft from the garage hit my bare shoulders, causing a violent shiver to ripple through me. Before I could even wrap my arms around myself, James was moving. He unzipped his leather jacket and shrugged it off in one fluid motion. James, you don't have to. He didn't listen. He draped the heavy leather over my shoulders. It was huge on me, swallowing my upper body. It smelled intensely of him. Musk, expensive cologne, and the faint metallic tang of gun oil. It was heavy, warm, and suffocatingly protective. Better, he stated, looking at me with critical satisfaction. The contrast must have been striking. The delicate red silk peeking out from under the rugged, worn leather of a killer. Let's go. The elevator ride was a silent ascent into the clouds. There were no buttons. James scanned his thumb on a panel, and the machine surged upward, skipping 40 floors in seconds. I watched the numbers climb, my stomach doing somersaults. "Who is up there?" I asked, breaking the hum of the machinery. "My inner circle," James answered, looking straight ahead at the steel doors. "The capo regimes. 5 men who control the districts of the city. They are loyal mostly, but they are sharks. If they smell blood, they bite." He turned his head slowly to look at me. The harsh overhead lighting of the elevator carved shadows into his face, highlighting the scar on his eyebrow and the ruthless set of his jaw. "Do not bleed, Mia." The doors dinged open. We stepped onto the top floor. It was an open-concept office that screamed power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Bay of Naples, the water glittering deceptively peaceful below. But the focus of the room was the massive mahogany table in the center, around which 5 men sat. The conversation in the room died instantly. 5 pairs of eyes snapped to us. I felt the weight of their stares physically, like stones being placed on my chest. They looked at James with respect. Yes, but they looked at me with confusion. Who brings a woman in a red dress and an oversized leather jacket to a war council? James didn't pause. He didn't introduce me. He didn't explain. He walked to the head of the table, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back, guiding me. He pulled out the chair to his immediate right, the seat of honor, usually reserved for the consigliere. "Sit," he commanded softly. I sat. The leather jacket slipped slightly off one shoulder, revealing the strap of the red dress. A collective intake of breath went through the room. James took his seat at the head of the table. He didn't look at his men. He looked at me. He reached for the crystal pitcher of water in the center of the table and poured a glass. He placed it in front of me, his fingers lingering on the cool glass for a second. "Hydrate," he murmured, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You had a long morning." Only then did he look up. His eyes swept the table, cold and flat. "Gentlemen," he said, "we have a problem at the docks." The meeting began. For 20 minutes, I was a ghost. They spoke in rapid-fire Italian dialect, discussing unions, payoffs, and police rotations. I sat there, sipping my water, trying to make myself as small as possible inside James's jacket. But I could feel eyes on me. Specifically, the eyes of the man sitting opposite me. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, with a face that looked like it had been chewed up and spat out by a bulldog. He had been introduced as Russo. He hadn't stopped staring at me since I sat down. It wasn't a look of desire. It was a look of calculation, of dismissal. "Don Moretti," Russo interrupted suddenly, his voice like grinding gravel. He pointed a thick, cigar-stained finger at me. "With all due respect, why is the girl here? This is family business, not a fashion show." The room went dead silent. I froze. This was it. The bite. James slowly stopped tapping his pen on the table. He turned his head to Russo. The movement was mechanical, devoid of humanity. "The girl," James repeated the words, testing them on his tongue as if they were poison, "has a name. Mia Rossi." "Rossi?" Russo scoffed, leaning back. "The daughter of the old man. I know who she is. I also know her father is desperate to sell her off to cover his debts. She is a liability, James. A distraction. Look at her." He waved a hand at me dismissively. "She is shaking." I was shaking. My hands were trembling under the table. I clenched them into fists, digging my nails into my palms. "She is not a distraction," James said, his voice dropping an octave. "She is my fiancée." "Fiancée?" Russo spat the word. "Since when do we bring women to the table, unless she is here to serve the coffee?" A few of the other men chuckled nervously. James didn't move, but the air around him seemed to darken. I saw his right hand move below the table level. I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that his hand was hovering over the gun in his waistband. "James," I whispered. He didn't look at me. He was locked on Russo like a missile guidance system. "You think she is useless, Russo?" James asked softly. "I think she is decorative," Russo sneered. "Expensive decoration, but decoration nonetheless. We are discussing the shipment of the San Gennaro artifacts. What does she know about smuggling routes? Does she know anything other than how to match her lipstick to her dress?" "Artifacts." My head snapped up. "The San Gennaro shipment?" I asked. My voice was shaky, but audible. Russo looked at me with mocking surprise. "The little bird speaks." "You're moving the reliquaries," I said, my mind racing back to my degree, to the hours I spent studying Neapolitan history while hiding from my father. From the museum archives. "Clever girl." Russo rolled his eyes. "Yes, we are moving gold. Lots of it." "It's not gold," I said louder. James turned to me. For the first time, his eyes weren't protective. They were curious. "Mia?" I took a deep breath. I pushed the leather jacket off my shoulders, letting it fall onto the back of the chair. I sat up straight, the red silk gleaming under the harsh office lights. I wasn't just a scared girl anymore. I was an expert. "If you're taking the crates marked San Gennaro from the port storage," I said, looking directly at Russo, "you aren't moving gold. You're moving gilded bronze from the 17th century. It's historically significant, yes, but the metal content is low. If you try to melt it down, you'll get slag worth maybe 10,000 euros. Russo frowned. "What are you talking about? The manifest says gold." "The manifest is for customs," I explained, gaining confidence. "But the collection, I wrote my thesis on it. The real value isn't the metal. It's the provenance. If you sell those pieces on the black market in Hong Kong or Dubai as raw materials, you'll lose millions. But if you sell them to a private collector as intact historical pieces..." I looked at James. He was watching me with an intensity that made my toes curl. He wasn't looking at my body. He was looking at my mind. "How much?" James asked me. "Intact?" I calculated quickly. "If you have the bust of the saint, maybe 5 million. Melted down? $300. Silence. Absolute stunned silence. Russo looked pale. We were planning to melt it, to avoid tracing." "Then you were planning to burn $5 million, I said, crossing my arms over my chest. James slowly turned his gaze back to Russo. A smile, sharp, cruel, and terrifying, spread across his face. "It seems," James said, his voice dripping with venomous delight, "that the decorative girl just saved us more money than you have earned in the last decade. Russo." Russo opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked from me to James, realizing his mistake. He had attacked the weak link, only to find out the link was made of steel. "We changed the plan," James announced to the room, taking charge effortlessly. "We do not melt. We crate them for private auction. Mia will review the inventory list to ensure we identify the high-value targets." He turned to me. "Will you do that for me, Tesoro?" It wasn't an order. It was an offer. A partnership. "Yes," I said breathlessly. "Good." James reached out. In front of everyone, in front of the sharks, the killers, the doubters, he took my hand. He brought it to his lips and kissed my knuckles, his eyes never leaving Russo's face. It was a clear message. She is not just my woman. She is my equal. Meeting adjourned, James barked. "Get out." The men scrambled. Even Russo gathered his papers with fumbling hands, unable to leave fast enough. Within 30 seconds, the room was empty. Just me, James, and the panoramic view of the city. I let out a breath I had been holding for 20 minutes, slumping slightly in my chair. The adrenaline crash hit me hard. "You were magnificent." James's voice came from right beside me. I hadn't noticed him move. He spun my chair around so I was facing him. He was leaning against the table, his legs spread, looking down at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Pride? Lust? Both. I knew about the statues, I stammered, feeling shy again now that the battle was over. I didn't want you to lose money. I don't care about the money, James said, reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered on my neck, his thumb tracing the pulse that was still racing there. I care that you stood up to him. You didn't hide, Mia. You fought. I was terrified, I admitted. That makes it bravery, he countered. His hand moved from my neck to my shoulder, sliding down the bare skin of my arm until he held my hand. Russo is a dog that barks at anything he doesn't understand. He saw beauty, and he assumed weakness. You proved him wrong. He pulled me up from the chair. I stood between his legs, the red silk brushing against his denim jeans. The friction was electric. You fit, he murmured, his gaze dropping to my lips. In this room, in this life, you fit, Mia. I don't know if I want to fit, I whispered. This world, it's dangerous, James. Those men work for me, he interrupted, his voice fierce. He wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me flush against him. The leather jacket I had discarded lay on the chair, but I didn't need it anymore. His heat was enough. And now, they answer to you. Because you are with me. He lowered his head, his forehead resting against mine. I told you I was a greedy man, he breathed, his scent filling my lungs. I wanted your beauty. I wanted your fire. But now I want your mind too. I want all of it. My hands instinctively came up to rest on his chest. I could feel his heart beating. Steady, strong, rhythmic. And what do I get? I asked, a ghost of my old defiance resurfacing. I save you millions, and I get what? A headache and a scary fiancé? James laughed. A real laugh this time, vibrating against my chest. You get whatever you want, he promised. He pulled back slightly to look me in the eyes. You want to run a gallery? I'll buy you the biggest one in Naples. You want to save every stray cat in Italy? I'll build a sanctuary. You want Russo's tongue on a platter for insulting you? His eyes darkened playfully. I can arrange that by dinner. No tongues, I said quickly. Pity, he smirked. But the offer stands. You are not a prisoner, Mia, not anymore. You are a partner. He checked his watch, the moment of intimacy shifting but not breaking. Now, he said, stepping back but keeping one hand firmly on my waist. We have a lunch reservation. And after that, we are going to see your father. My blood ran cold. Why? James's expression shifted. The loving protector vanished, replaced by the cold king. Because, he said, guiding me toward the elevator, he sold me a diamond for the price of coal. And I think it's time we renegotiated the terms. He made you think you were worthless, Mia. Today, I am going to show him exactly how much you are worth. As the elevator doors closed, shutting out the empty boardroom, I realized something. I wasn't afraid of James anymore. I was afraid for anyone who stood against him. And for the first time in my life, the monster was on my side. The gravel crunched under the massive tires of the SUV. It was a familiar sound, one that used to signal my father's return and the inevitable inspection of my failures. Today, it sounded like an invasion. James didn't wait for the driver. He opened his own door, walked around the back of the vehicle, and opened mine. Breathe, he ordered softly, extending his hand. I looked at the imposing front door of my childhood home. I feel like I'm going to throw up. You won't, James said, his voice absolute. Because you are not walking in there as his daughter. You are walking in as my fiancé. In the hierarchy of power, Mia, you now outrank him. Do not forget that. I took his hand. It was warm, dry, steady. A stark contrast to my palms, which were clammy with sweat. We walked up the steps. The front door flew open before we could knock. My father, Giovanni Rossi, stood there. He was wearing his business face, a forced smile that didn't reach his watery, calculating eyes. Behind him, My stepmother hovered like a nervous moth. "Don Moretti!" My father boomed, spreading his arms as if welcoming a long-lost brother. "We didn't expect you back so soon. And... Mia?" His voice faltered. He stopped mid-gesture. His eyes traveled from James's face down to me. He blinked. He squinted. It was as if he was trying to process a glitch in the Matrix. I wasn't wearing the baggy gray sweater. I wasn't hunching. The red silk dress flowed around me like liquid fire, the slit revealing a leg clad in sheer stockings and heels that added 3 inches to my height. My hair was loose, wild, framing a face that was no longer hidden behind oily makeup and glasses. "Mia?" he repeated. But this time it was a question. A confused, almost offended question. "Giovanni." James greeted him with a nod that was more of a dismissal than a salutation. He didn't let go of my hand. In fact, he pulled me closer to his side, creating a united front of black leather and red silk. "We need to talk. About the contract." Greed flashed in my father's eyes, momentarily overriding his confusion about my appearance. Of course. The dowry negotiation. "Please, come in." To the study. We walked through the foyer. I noticed things I hadn't before. The carpet was threadbare in spots. The paint was peeling slightly near the ceiling. It wasn't the grand palace I remembered as a child. It was a decaying monument to a man who spent money he didn't have to impress people who didn't care. In the study, my father rushed to sit behind his large oak desk, his throne. He gestured for us to sit in the 2 lower visitor chairs. James didn't sit. He walked to the window, looking out at the overgrown garden. He let the silence stretch. He weaponized it. My father fidgeted, arranging papers that didn't need arranging. "So," my father cleared his throat, unable to bear the quiet. "I assume you, found the girl satisfactory? I know she is a bit plain, and her temperament is difficult, but..." "Plain," James repeated the word to the glass window. He turned around slowly. "Is that what you see, Giovanni? Plain?" My father looked at me again. He looked uncomfortable, as if my sudden beauty was an insult to him. "Well, she cleans up, I suppose," he muttered dismissively. "But we were discussing the terms. You agreed to wipe the gambling debt in exchange for her hand. I have the papers here." James walked to the desk. He picked up the contract. He read it in silence, his face an unreadable mask of stone. "You sold her," James said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Like a used car. You listed her defects. Obedient but uninspired. Domestic skills adequate. No higher education." My father shrugged, sweating slightly. "I had to be honest about the merchandise, Don Moretti. I didn't want you to come back claiming fraud later. She's useless for anything other than breeding heirs, we both know that. I was doing you a favor. Useless." The word hung in the air. I flinched. Old habits die hard. James saw the flinch, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Mia," James said, not looking away from my father. "Tell him about the San Gennaro shipment." "What?" My father frowned. "Don't involve her in business. She doesn't understand." "Tell him," James commanded gently. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but the red dress gave me armor. I looked at the man who had told me for 20 years that I was stupid. James's men were going to melt down 17th century bronze busts, I said, my voice gaining strength with every word. Because they didn't understand the provenance. I stopped them. I corrected the valuation. I turned a €10,000 scrap job into a €5 million auction sale. My father's jaw dropped. "What? You? You don't know anything about business." "She has a degree in art history, Giovanni," James interjected smoothly. "With honors. Did you know that?" "Art?" My father scoffed. "A hobby. A waste of time. A hobby that just made me €5 million in 20 minutes, James corrected. He leaned over the desk, planting his hands on the wood. He loomed over my father like a dark angel of judgment. "She is not useless. She is the most valuable asset in this room. The only thing useless here is your judgment." My father turned red. "Now, see here, Moretti. I am still her father. You can't come into my house and—" "I can," James interrupted softly. "Because I own this house." The silence that followed was deafening. What?" my father stammered. "Your gambling debts were not just with me," James explained, as if teaching a child. "You borrowed from the Russians, the Camorra, the banks. You leveraged the deed to this estate 3 times over." James reached into his inner jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded document. "I bought the debt," James said. "All of it. Every cent you owe to every shark in Europe. I own it. Which means I own this house. I own the car outside. I own the shirt on your back." He tossed the document onto the desk. It landed with a heavy slap. "And now," James said, stepping back and holding his hand out to me, "I am taking the only thing of value you ever had, and I am leaving you with the rest." I stared at James. He had bought my freedom, not just via marriage, but he had literally bought the leverage my father held over me. You can't leave me with nothing!" my father cried, standing up, panic setting in. "Mia, tell him about family loyalty." He looked at me. For the first time in his life, he looked at me with need, with desperation. "Mia, please, I'm your papa." I looked at the man who had made me wear ugly clothes to feel safe, the man who had mocked my books, the man who had sold me to pay for his poker losses. Then I looked at James, the man who had wiped my sweat, the man who had put me in red silk, the man who stood between me and the world like a wall of steel. I walked over to the desk. I picked up the contract, the marriage contract that listed me as merchandise. I looked my father in the eye. "You're right, Papa," I said softly. "You were honest about the merchandise." Yes, I was." He nodded frantically. "You said I was uninspired," I continued, "but you were wrong. I'm very inspired." I ripped the contract in half, then in quarters. The sound of tearing paper was the loudest thing in the room. I let the confetti pieces rain down onto his desk. "I'm inspired to leave," I finished. I turned on my heel. The swirl of the red dress caught the air. "James?" I asked. "Yes, Regina?" "Take me home." James smiled. It was the proudest smile I had ever seen. He looked at my father one last time. "You heard the lady," James said. "You have 24 hours to vacate the premises, Giovanni. After that, my men will come to renovate. I suggest you not be here." He turned and offered me his arm. We walked out of the study. We walked through the foyer. We walked out the front door. I didn't look back. The sun had started to set, casting long orange shadows across the gravel driveway. The air felt different, lighter. When we reached the car, James didn't open the door immediately. He pinned me gently against the side of the vehicle, his body pressed against mine, his hands resting on my waist. "Are you okay?" he asked, searching my eyes. I took a deep breath, my lungs filled with air that didn't smell of cigar smoke. "I feel empty, but in a good way, like I just threw out a lot of garbage." James chuckled, leaning his forehead against mine. "That's called freedom, Mia. You bought the debt," I whispered, looking at his lips. "Why? You didn't have to. You already had me." "I didn't want you because of a contract," James said fiercely. "I didn't want you because I forced him. I wanted you to choose." He pulled back slightly. "So I'm asking you now, with no debts, no fathers, no contracts hanging over our heads. Do you want to come with me? If you say no, I will give you the deed to this house, enough money to start your gallery, and I will walk away. You will never see me again." My heart stopped. He was giving me an out. A real one. I could have the money, the freedom, the safety. I looked at his face, the scar on his brow, the darkness in his eyes that only lightened for me. If I chose the money, I would be safe. but I would be alone. If I chose him, I would be in the lion's den. I would be in danger every day, but I would be alive. I reached up. My hands tangled in the hair at the nape of his neck. "I told you," I whispered. "I'm clumsy." "So?" he breathed. "So I think I've already fallen," I confessed. "For the monster." James groaned, a low, primal sound. He didn't ask for permission this time. He took it. He kissed me. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was acclaiming. It was hungry, desperate, and possessive. His mouth devoured mine, tasting of coffee and victory. My hands gripped his leather jacket, pulling him closer, needing to feel every inch of his strength. We were kissing like teenagers in a driveway, but the weight of it was ancient. He broke the kiss, breathless, his eyes black with desire. "Let's go home," he growled. "Before I take you right here on the hood of the car and give the neighbors a heart attack." I laughed, a real free laugh. "Yes, let's go home." As we drove away, leaving the crumbling Rossi estate behind in the rearview mirror, I realized the truth. The ugly girl was gone. The invisible girl was dead. The queen had just ascended her throne, and God help anyone who tried to take it from her. The elevator doors slid open with a whisper, revealing a space that felt less like a home and more like a fortress suspended in the sky. Dante's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the Moretti Tower. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture, floor-to-ceiling glass walls, polished concrete floors, and furniture that looked sharp enough to cut you. It was beautiful, impressive, and utterly devoid of warmth. It felt cold, sterile, a place where a man came to exist, not to live. "Welcome home," Dante said, stepping out and pulling me gently into the room. The sound of our footsteps echoed. The silence here was different from the silence in the car. It was heavy, pressurized. We were hundreds of feet above the city, looking down on the grid of Naples like gods on Olympus. But I had never felt more grounded. "It's big," I managed to say, clutching the leather jacket he had lent me tighter around my shoulders. The red silk dress felt too vibrant for this monochromatic world of grays and blacks. "It's secure," Dante corrected. He walked over to a panel on the wall and pressed a sequence of buttons. Steel shutters began to retract silently from the windows, revealing the glittering night skyline. Biometric locks on every door, reinforced blast-proof glass, independent air filtration system. "You are safer here than in the president's bunker." I watched him. He was moving through the space like a predator pacing his cage. He wasn't relaxing. He was checking angles. His eyes scanned the room, the hallway, the shadows. "Dante," I called out softly. He stopped. He turned to me, and for a split second, I saw the exhaustion in his eyes. The weight of the empire he carried. The weight of the debt he had just paid for me. "You don't have to check the perimeter," I said, walking toward him. "We're alone." "I always check," he murmured, rubbing the back of his neck. "Old habits keep you alive." He looked at me, standing there in the middle of his living room, a splash of red in his gray world. His expression softened. The tension that held his shoulders in a permanent military set seemed to melt away. Just a fraction. "You look tired," he noted, walking back to me. "It's been a long day," I admitted. "I went from being the ugly duckling to whatever this is." I gestured to the dress, the heels, the luxury. "It's a lot of whiplash." "Come," he said, extending his hand. "I want to show you something." I took his hand. He led me down a long hallway lined with abstract art, black canvases with slashes of white. Very Dante. Angry. Controlled. He stopped at a double door at the end of the hall. "I told you I did my research," he said, his hand on the handle. "But research is just data. Understanding. That requires effort." He pushed the doors open. I gasped. The sound was involuntary, ripped from my throat. The room wasn't gray. It wasn't cold. It was chaos. Beautiful, organized chaos. It was a studio. But not just a generic art room. It was flooded with natural light from the skylights above. There were easels, tables covered in high-quality sketchbooks, jars of brushes of every size. But what made my heart stop was the back wall. It was covered in shelves. And on the shelves were books, rare art history volumes, biographies of Renaissance masters, texts on Neapolitan sculpture, and in the corner, a clay wheel and a kiln. You knew about the sculpting? I whispered, walking into the room as if entering a holy site. I ran my fingers over the cold metal of the wheel. I hadn't sculpted since my father threw out my supplies when I was 16. I knew you liked to work with your hands, Dante said, leaning against the doorframe, watching me explore. I saw the calluses on your fingers. The way you look at structures, not just surfaces. You like to build things, Elena. Or fix them. I turned to him. Tears were pricking my eyes again. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming feeling of being known. You did this. When? Yesterday, he admitted. After I decided I wasn't going to let you go. You were that confident? No. He shook his head slowly. I was that hopeful. He walked over to me. The space between us felt charged, magnetic. He reached out and touched the strap of the red dress. But right now, he murmured, his voice dropping to that husky register that made my knees weak. You are still wearing the armor of war, and the war is over for tonight. He turned me around gently. I felt his fingers at the zipper of the dress. My breath hitched. This was it. The moment the marriage contract became real physically. I tensed, bracing myself. Dante stopped. Relax, he whispered against my hair. I am not collecting a debt, Elena. I told you. You choose. He pulled the zipper down slowly. The cool air hit my skin. The silk pooled at my feet. I stood there in my lace undergarments, feeling incredibly vulnerable, yet strangely safe. He didn't touch me inappropriately. He placed his hands on my bare shoulders, massaging the tension knots there. Go, he said softly, nodding toward a door on the left. The bathroom is through there. There is a soaking tub. Hot water. Oils. Wash off the day. Wash off your father's house. I turned to look at him over my shoulder. And you? I have to make some calls, he said, his eyes darkening slightly. Russo's humiliation today will have consequences. I need to make sure the fallout is contained. Dante, go, he urged gently. I'll be here when you get out. An hour later, I emerged. I was wearing one of his shirts. It was a crisp white dress shirt that reached my mid-thighs. It smelled like him, detergent and sandalwood. I had scrubbed the makeup off, washed the hairspray out of my hair. I was clean. I was just Elena. I found him in the living room. He had shed the jacket and the holster. He was sitting on the leather sofa, a tumbler of amber liquid in one hand, staring out at the city lights. His other hand was massaging his temple. He looked lonely. The King of Naples, sitting in his glass tower, watching over a kingdom that wanted to kill him. I walked over. The soft pad of my bare feet on the concrete alerted him. He looked up. His eyes swept over me, the wet hair, the oversized shirt, the bare legs. A fire lit in his gaze, but he kept it leashed. Better? He asked. Much, I said. I hesitated, then sat down next to him, not on the other end of the sofa. Close enough that our thighs touched. He stiffened slightly, then relaxed into the contact. You should be resting, he said, taking a sip of his drink. I'm not tired anymore. I lied. I was exhausted, but my mind was racing. Dante, at the meeting today, you defended me, but you also made enemies. I have enemies when I breathe, Elena. It makes no difference. It does, I countered. Russo, the way he looked at me, he wasn't just angry, he was humiliated. A man like that holds a grudge. Dante set the glass down on the coffee table with a sharp clack. He turned his body toward me, draping his arm along the back of the sofa behind my head. "Let me worry about Russo," he said firmly. "Your job is to enjoy the studio. To eat. To sleep without fearing your father walking through the door." "I can't just turn it off," I said, frustration bubbling up. "I've spent my whole life looking over my shoulder. You can't expect me to suddenly become a carefree princess just because you have nice locks on the doors." Dante stared at me for a long moment. Then, he did something unexpected. He started to unbutton his shirt. My eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "Showing you," he said calmly. He undid the buttons and shrugged the black shirt off his shoulders. I gasped. His torso was a map of violence. There was a jagged white line running across his ribs, a knife wound, a round puckered scar on his left shoulder, a bullet, faint, crisscrossing lines on his back that looked like whip marks. He wasn't just muscular. He was scarred. He was a living history book of pain. This, he pointed to the knife wound, was when I was 15. A rival gang tried to take my corner. He pointed to the bullet wound. 22. An assassination attempt at my father's funeral. He took my hand. His grip was gentle, contrasting with the violence of his skin. He placed my palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. I could feel the steady, powerful thrum of it beating against my fingertips. "I have looked over my shoulder every day of my life, Elena," he said softly. "I know you can't turn it off. I'm not asking you to forget the fear. I'm asking you to share the watch." I traced the line of a scar with my thumb. His skin twitched under my touch. "Share the watch?" I whispered. "When you sleep, I watch," he promised. "When I sleep, you watch. We are not just husband and wife on paper. We are partners in survival. That is what marriage means in this life." It was the most romantic, terrifying thing anyone had ever said to me. It wasn't a promise of flowers and chocolates. It was a blood oath. "Okay," I breathed. "Okay, I'll watch." Dante leaned in. His eyes were heavy-lidded, focused on my mouth. The air between us crackled, thick and hot. "You are beautiful," he murmured. "Without the paint, without the red dress, just like this. In my shirt." He tilted his head, closing the distance. But before our lips could meet, a sound shattered the moment. A high-pitched electronic chirp. It didn't sound like a phone. It sounded like an alarm. Dante pulled back instantly. The lover vanished. The soldier returned. He looked at his smartwatch. The face of the watch was flashing red. "Don't move," he ordered. His voice was ice. He stood up and moved to the wall panel he had used earlier. He tapped the screen furiously. "What is it?" I asked, standing up, clutching the shirt closed. "Dante?" "Perimeter breach," he said, his eyes scanning the security feeds that popped up on the wall screen. "Someone is in the private elevator." "The one we came up in?" "Yes. But I thought you needed a thumbprint." "You do," Dante said grimly. He reached under the coffee table and pulled out a gun I hadn't even known was taped there. He checked the chamber in one fluid motion, which means whoever is coming up has the finger of someone I trust. My blood ran cold. The elevator dinged. Dante stepped in front of me immediately. He was a human shield, gun raised, pointed at the steel doors. "Get to the studio," he commanded, not looking back. "Lock the door. Don't open it unless you hear my voice." "I'm not leaving you," I said, grabbing a heavy marble statue from the side table. It was a ridiculous weapon against a gun, but it was heavy. "Elena!" he barked. "Partners!" I shouted back. "You said partners!" The elevator doors slid open. Dante's finger tightened on the trigger. But the elevator was empty. No gunmen, no assassins. Just a small, elegantly wrapped gift box sitting in the center of the floor. Dante didn't lower the gun. He moved forward cautiously, kicking the elevator sensor to keep the doors from closing. He scanned the corners. Nothing. He looked at the box. It was wrapped in black paper with a red ribbon. "Stay back," he warned me. He approached the box. He didn't touch it. He used the barrel of his gun to flip the lid open. Inside there was no bomb, No severed finger. There was a phone. And it was ringing. Dante looked at me, then picked up the phone. He put it on speaker. "Moretti," he answered. A voice crackled through the speaker. Distorted. Digital. But the mockery was unmistakable. "Nice view from up there, Dante," the voice said. "Did you like the gift?" "Who is this?" Dante demanded, his eyes scanning the room, realizing that if they could put a box in the elevator, they could be anywhere. "A friend," the voice said. "Or a concerned party. You made a bold move today, taking the Rossi girl. Some of us think you're getting distracted. Sentimental." I stepped closer to Dante's back. He tensed but didn't push me away. "If you have something to say, come say it to my face," Dante challenged. "Or are you too busy hiding behind a voice modulator?" "Oh, I'll see you soon," the voice laughed. "But tonight is just a warning. The glass tower is pretty, Dante, but glass breaks so easily." The line went dead. Dante crushed the phone in his hand. The plastic cracked under his grip. He turned to me. His face was pale, not with fear, but with rage. Pure, unadulterated fury. "They were here," he whispered. "In my building." "Who?" I asked. "The board," he said. "The inner circle. Only 5 people have access to that elevator override. Russo. And 4 others." He looked at the shattered phone, then at me. "One of them is a traitor," he realized. "One of the men who sat at my table today. Who kissed my ring. Who smiled at you." He walked over to the window, looking out at the city that suddenly seemed less like a kingdom and more like a battlefield. "I brought you here to keep you safe," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I thought I was bringing you to the top of the mountain. Instead, I brought you into a trap." He turned back to me. The look in his eyes was terrifying. It was the look of a man who was about to burn the world down to find a single rat. "Get dressed, Elena," he ordered softly. "Where are we going?" "We're going to war," he said. "If they want to see if I'm distracted, I'm going to show them exactly how focused I am." He walked to the wall safe hidden behind a painting and opened it. He pulled out a second gun. He walked over to me and held it out, handle first. "Do you know how to use this?" I looked at the heavy black metal. Then I looked at him. The partner. The protector. I took the gun. It was heavy. Cold. "No," I said honestly. Dante covered my hands with his, adjusting my grip. "I'll teach you," he said. "Lesson 1. Never point it at anything you don't intend to destroy." He looked at the elevator, then back at me. "We're going to find out who sent that box," he promised. "And then, we're going to return it, piece by piece." The gun felt alien in my hand. It was a Glock 19, matte black, cold, and surprisingly heavy. It didn't feel like a tool of protection. It felt like a promise of violence. "Finger off the trigger," James corrected me. His voice was calm, a stark contrast to the storm raging in his eyes. He stood behind me in the center of the penthouse living room, his chest pressed against my back, his arms guiding mine. "Until you are ready to destroy what is in front of you, the finger stays on the frame. Here." He moved my index finger to the side of the gun. The skin-on-skin contact was electric, grounding me in the reality of the moment. We weren't lovers embracing in the moonlight anymore. We were soldiers preparing for a siege. "Who do you think it is?" I asked, lowering the weapon. My arms ached from the tension. "Russo? He hated me at the meeting." James stepped back, pacing the room like a caged tiger. He walked over to the gift box that still sat on the floor, the black box that had delivered the threat. "Russo is a loudmouth," James dismissed. "He barks so everyone knows he's there. This..." He gestured to the empty elevator. "This was quiet, calculated. Russo would have sent a thug to break my legs. He wouldn't have hacked my security system to leave a riddle. So it's one of the others," I reasoned, staring at the black wrapping paper. 5 men sat at that table. 4 now, James corrected. "If we exclude Russo." He picked up the phone that had been in the box. It was crushed. Useless. He tossed it onto the sofa. "I need to listen to the call again," I said suddenly. James looked at me. "Why?" It was a voice modulator, impossible to trace. "Not the voice," I said, walking over to the security panel on the wall where the audio file was saved. "The background. There was something." James didn't argue. He tapped the screen. The distorted voice filled the room again. "Nice view from up there, James. The glass tower is pretty. Glass breaks so easily." I closed my eyes, blocking out the visual of the luxury apartment, focusing entirely on the sound. I listened past the digital distortion, past the mockery. "Play it again," I said. "Louder." James adjusted the volume. "Bold move today, taking the Rossi girl." "Stop." I opened my eyes. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" James frowned. "Static?" "No." I shook my head, my mind racing back to the boardroom meeting, replaying the images of the men sitting there. It wasn't static. It was a click. A metallic snick hiss sound, 3 times in the background. "A lighter," James realized, his eyes narrowing. "A specific lighter," I corrected. "My father smoked cheap cigars. He used plastic lighters that made a scraping sound. This sound, it was heavy, distinctive, like a Zippo but sharper." I turned to James. "Who was smoking at the meeting?" "No one," James said. "I don't allow smoking in the war room." "Exactly," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "Which means the person was fidgeting with it. Nervous energy. Opening and closing the lid. Click, click, click." I walked over to the table where the meeting had taken place earlier. I closed my eyes, visualizing the seating arrangement. Russo was opposite me. To his right was Venezia, the old man who fell asleep. To his left, Conti. James finished the sentence. The name hung in the air like smoke. "Alessandro Conti," I whispered. "The young one. The one in the gray suit who didn't say a word." He had a silver lighter on the table next to his notebook. He kept playing with it while I was talking about the bronze statues. James's expression turned into a mask of terrifying clarity. "Conti," he growled. "He's ambitious. He thinks I'm too old-fashioned. He thinks the family should move into synthetics and trafficking. Lines I refuse to cross." "He called you sentimental," I reminded him. "He thinks you're weak, because you chose me." James walked to the closet. He pulled out a black dress shirt and tossed it on the sofa, then began stripping off the one he was wearing. "He thinks I'm weak?" James said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Then let's show him exactly what kind of monster he woke up." "What are we going to do?" I asked. James pulled the fresh shirt on, fastening the buttons with precise, angry movements. He strapped his shoulder holster back on. "Conti runs a club downtown, the Inferno," James explained. "He holds court there on Saturday nights. He'll be there right now, celebrating his little prank, waiting for me to panic and lock down the tower." He turned to me. He looked me up and down. At the oversized white shirt I was still wearing, my bare legs, my washed face. "Get dressed, Mia," he ordered. "Put on the black pantsuit you tried on at the boutique. Slick your hair back." "We're going to a club?" "No," James said, checking the magazine of his gun. "We are going to a public execution. Not a physical one. I can't kill a capo without proof or a trial. It would start a civil war. But I am going to walk into his territory, look him in the eye, and let him know that I know." Psychological warfare, I realized. Exactly. James walked over to me. He placed his hands on my face, his thumbs brushing my cheekbones. "He expects you to be hiding under the bed, crying. He expects me to be frantic. Instead, we're going to walk through his front door like we own the place. We are going to drink his champagne. And you," he leaned in, his lips brushing my ear, "you are going to smile at him. You are going to look at him with those defiant eyes, and you are going to make him sweat." The Inferno lived up to its name. It was a cavern of red lights, throbbing bass, and bodies moving in a synchronized frenzy. The air smelled of sweat, expensive vodka, and desperation. We didn't wait in line. The bouncers took one look at James and parted like the Red Sea. Their faces went pale. They whispered into their headsets, alerting the boss that the devil had just arrived. I walked beside James. I was wearing the black tailored suit, sharp shoulders, deep V neckline, wide-leg trousers that swished as I moved. My hair was pulled back in a severe, high ponytail. I wore no jewelry except for the massive diamond engagement ring James had slipped on my finger in the car. "Stay close," James murmured, his hand resting on the small of my back. "Don't let go of my arm." We moved through the crowd. The music was deafening, a physical force thumping in my chest. People stared. They recognized James. The whispers started, spreading across the dance floor faster than the beat. "Dawn Moretti is here. Who is the woman? She looks like a blade." We headed straight for the VIP section, a raised balcony overlooking the chaos. Alessandro Conti was there. He was sitting on a velvet sofa, surrounded by women in scant clothing and men who laughed too loudly at his jokes. He held a crystal tumbler in one hand and a silver lighter in the other. Click, snap, click. He looked comfortable, arrogant. Then he saw us. The lighter froze in his hand. For a second, the mask slipped. Pure shock registered on his face. He hadn't expected James to leave the fortress. He certainly hadn't expected us to come here. James didn't stop. He walked right up to the table. The music seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the tension radiating from him. "Alessandro," James greeted, his voice cutting through the noise. He didn't shout. He projected authority. Conti scrambled to stand up. He was handsome in a slimy way. Too much gel in his hair, a suit that was too shiny. "Dawn Moretti." Conti smiled, but it was brittle. "What a surprise. To what do I owe the honor? I thought you were occupied." "I was," James said smoothly, "but my fiancé and I felt like celebrating." James pulled me forward. "You remember Mia," James said. "From the meeting." Conti looked at me. His eyes darted to my face, then to James, then back to the lighter in his hand. He shoved the lighter into his pocket quickly. "Of course," Conti nodded. "The art historian. You look different tonight, Signorina." "I feel different, Mr. Conti," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. I looked him dead in the eye. It's amazing what a little fresh air can do. Some people think glass towers are stifling. I find the view clarifying. Conti flinched, just a micro-expression, a twitch of the eye. He knew that I knew. "Sit," James commanded, not asking. He sat on the sofa opposite Conti, spreading his legs, taking up space. He pulled me down next to him. "Pour us a drink, Alessandro. To the family." Conti signaled a waitress with a trembling hand. "Champagne. The vintage." The bottle arrived with sparklers. It was a spectacle, but the mood at the table was funeral. "So," James said, leaning back, looking relaxed and lethal. "How is business, Alessandro? Any new ventures I should know about? Any new partners?" "Business is steady, Dawn Moretti," Conti lied, sweating under the club lights. "Just the usual. You know how it is." "I do." James swirled his glass. "Loyalty is a rare currency these days. Some men get greedy. They see a crown, and they think it's just a hat they can try on. They don't realize it's heavy. They don't realize it crushes weak necks." Conti swallowed hard. "A poetic thought, Dawn. Mia was just telling me." James continued, turning to me with a loving, terrifying smile. "About the history of traitors in Rome. What happens to them, amore?" I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand, staring straight at Conti. "Well," I said, keeping my tone conversational, "in James Alighieri's Inferno, fitting for this club, isn't it? Traitors are kept in the deepest circle of hell, frozen in ice, unable to move, unable to speak, eternally chewed on by the devil. I paused. I always thought the ice was a nice touch. Fire is too quick. Ice preserves the regret. Conti was pale now. He reached for his drink, but his hand shook so badly the liquid splashed onto his sleeve. "Are you cold, Alessandro?" James asked, his voice dripping with mock concern. "You're shaking." "It's the air conditioning," Conti stammered. James stood up abruptly. The movement made Conti jump. "We shouldn't keep you," James said. "I just wanted to stop by, to see the view." He leaned over the table, bringing his face. "Next time you send a gift, Alessandro," James whispered, low enough that only we could hear, but loud enough to be a death sentence. "Make sure you wipe your fingerprints off the wrapping paper, because I don't like sloppy work." It was a bluff. We didn't have fingerprints. But Conti didn't know that. Panic exploded in Conti's eyes. James straightened up, adjusting his cuffs. "Come, Mia," he said, offering me his hand. "This place smells like rat. I need fresh air." We turned and walked away. We didn't run. We strolled. We walked through the crowd, past the bouncers, and out into the cool night air. As soon as we were inside the SUV, James exhaled. The calm mask dropped. "Did you see it?" James asked, turning to me. "The lighter," I said. "He put it in his pocket the second he saw me." "And the shake," James added. "He's guilty. He's scared." "So what happens now?" I asked. "You said you couldn't touch him without proof." James pulled out his phone. He typed a quick message. "I didn't need proof for a court of law, Mia. I needed him to panic. A panicked man makes mistakes. A scared man calls his backers for help." James held up his phone. A screen showed a GPS tracker moving rapidly. "He's leaving the club," James said grimly. "Right now. He's running." "Running where?" "To whoever put him up to this," James said. "Conti doesn't have the brains to hack my elevator. He has a backer, and he's going to lead us straight to them." James started the engine. The SUV roared to life. "Tonight ends," James said, looking at me with a fierce pride, "with the snake eating its own tail. You did good, Mia. You terrified him." "I learned from the best," I said, my hand finding his on the gear shift. "Hang on," James warned, shifting into gear. "We're going hunting." The car surged forward into the night, following the digital dot that represented the life of a traitor. The investigation was over. The hunt had begun. And for the first time, I wasn't the prey. I was the hunter's partner. The city blurred past the windows of the SUV, a streak of neon lights and rain-slicked asphalt. James drove with terrifying precision. He didn't speed recklessly. He moved like a shark through water, cutting through traffic with calculated aggression. His silence filled the car, heavy and sharp. "He's heading to the port," James said, his eyes flicking to the GPS tracker on the dashboard. "Pier 4. My stomach tightened. Pier 4 is abandoned. It's where the old shipping containers are stacked. It's a maze." "You know it." James glanced at me. "That's where the colony of stray cats lives," I whispered, clutching the door handle. "I go there 3 nights a week. I know every rust spot, every broken fence." James's hand left the gear shift and covered mine for a brief second. A silent acknowledgement. "You are not a passenger. You are a guide." "Then you are my eyes," he said. "When we get there, you tell me the choke points. But you stay in the car, Mia. That is non-negotiable." "James, non-negotiable." The tone was final. We arrived 10 minutes later. The rain had turned into a downpour, drumming rhythmically against the armored roof. The pier was a graveyard of steel, towering stacks of rusted shipping containers creating narrow, dark canyons. James killed the headlights. We rolled to a silent stop behind a stack of crates. Through the rain-streaked windshield, we saw it. Alessandro Conti's sports car was parked under a flickering halogen light. He was standing outside, shivering, arguing with 2 men in heavy gray coats. Russians. The backers. They're not happy with him, James observed, his voice calm. He failed. He panicked. Now he's a liability to them. I watched the scene. The body language was violent. One of the Russians shoved Conti. Conti stumbled back, pleading, his hands raised. "Stay here," James ordered. He checked his gun one last time. "Lock the doors." He slipped out of the car, dissolving into the shadows and the rain like he was made of them. I sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs. I watched James move. He was a phantom. He flanked them, using the noise of the rain to mask his approach. But then, I saw something James couldn't see. From the container directly above the Russians, a shadow moved. A sniper? A lookout? He was raising a rifle, aiming down at the spot where James would emerge. I couldn't scream. The windows were armored. They wouldn't hear me. If I opened the door, I'd alert them. I looked at the dashboard. The headlights control. I didn't think. I acted. I slammed my hand onto the high beam switch. The SUV's LED headlights exploded into life, cutting through the darkness like twin lasers. The sudden blinding light hit the Russians and Conti directly in the face. They flinched, shielding their eyes, blinded by the glare. The lookout on the container jerked, his aim ruined. Bang. Bang. 2 shots rang out, not from the lookout, from the shadows. James stepped out, gun raised, smoke mingling with the rain. The 2 Russians dropped to their knees, clutching their legs. Precise, disabling shots. James didn't kill unless he had to. He preferred to leave messages. The lookout scrambled, trying to flee across the container tops, but he slipped on the wet metal and disappeared into the night. Conti was left standing alone, blinking in the headlights, trembling. James walked up to him. He didn't run. He walked with the terrifying slowness of inevitable judgment. I couldn't stay in the car anymore. I unlocked the door and stepped out into the rain. The water soaked my black suit instantly, plastering the fabric to my skin, but I didn't feel the cold. "James!" I called out. James spun around, fury in his eyes for a moment because I had disobeyed him, but it softened when he saw I was safe. He turned back to Conti. "You brought foreigners into our city, Alessandro," James said, his voice carrying over the sound of the rain. "You sold our secrets. You threatened my home. And for what? A promise of power? They said you were weak," Conti screamed, hysterical. "They said you were distracted by the girl, that you were soft." James laughed. It was a dark, hollow sound. He holstered his gun. He walked right up to Conti, towering over him. "Soft?" James whispered. He struck. It was too fast to track. A swift, brutal punch to the gut that folded Conti in half, followed by a knee to the face. Conti hit the wet concrete hard, groaning, blood mixing with the rainwater. James grabbed Conti by the collar of his expensive suit and dragged him upright. "Look at her," James commanded, pointing at me. Conti, one eye swelling shut, looked at me standing in the headlights. "She is the one who blinded you," James snarled. "The distraction just saved my life and ended yours. She is more of a soldier than you will ever be." James shoved Conti backward. The traitor fell into a mud puddle, ruined. Sirens wailed in the distance. Police, or James's cleanup crew, or both. "Get out of my city," James ordered, looking down at the broken man. "If I see you in Naples when the sun rises, the ice won't be a metaphor." James turned his back on him. The ultimate insult. He didn't even consider Conti a threat worth watching anymore. He walked toward me. The rain dripped from his hair, running down the sharp planes of his face. He looked dangerous, wild, and magnificent. He stopped in front of me. He didn't care about the rain. He didn't care about the sirens getting louder. "You disobeyed me," he said roughly. "I saved you," I countered, tilting my chin up. "Yes," he admitted, his chest heaving. "You did." He grabbed my face with both hands, his grip firm, possessive. "I told you I wanted a partner," he growled against the rain. I didn't realize I was getting a guardian angel. He kissed me. It was desperate and wet and tasted of adrenaline. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him closer, anchoring myself to him. In the middle of the chaos, surrounded by rusted steel and the echo of gunshots, I found the only peace I had ever known. 2 hours later. The penthouse was quiet. The fire in the massive stone hearth crackled, casting dancing orange shadows across the room. We had showered the docks off our skin. I was wearing a silk robe, one of the many things James had bought for me. He was in sweatpants, shirtless, towel drying his hair near the fire. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion, but also a strange, vibrating clarity. I walked into the room, holding something in my hands. James turned. He saw what I was holding. The mustard yellow wool sweater. The ugly disguise. I had retrieved it from the bottom of my suitcase. James stopped drying his hair. He watched me, his expression unreadable. I walked to the fireplace. The heat flushed my cheeks. "You asked me to burn it," I said, looking at the pilled, scratchy fabric. "That first night, you said it irritated my skin." "I remember," James said softly. "I kept it," I confessed, "because I was afraid. I thought I might need it again. I thought you would realize you made a mistake, send me back, and I would need my armor to survive." James tossed the towel onto a chair and walked toward me. The firelight highlighted the fresh bruise on his knuckles where he had hit Conti. "And now?" he asked, stopping inches from me. I looked at the sweater. It represented years of hiding, years of believing I wasn't enough, years of trying to disappear so I wouldn't be hurt. Then I looked at James, the man who saw the diamond in the rough, the man who gave me a gallery, a gun, and a choice. "Now," I said, my voice steady. "I know that armor is just a cage." I threw the sweater into the fire. We watched it land on the logs. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the synthetic wool caught. It curled, blackened, and burst into flames. The ugly yellow turned to ash. The smoke sucked up the chimney. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying since I was 16. James wrapped his arms around me from behind. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. "It's gone," he murmured. "Yes." I leaned back into him. "Whatever happens next, I face it as myself." James turned me around in his arms. The look in his eyes was so tender it made my heart ache. It was the look of the teddy bear, the soft, devoted creature that lived inside the monster, existing only for me. "Marry me," he said. I blinked. We have a contract. We're already engaged." "No," he shook his head. "Forget the contract. Forget the alliance. Forget the family." He took my hand, the one with the ring, and pressed it to his chest, right over his heart. "I, James, take you, Mia," he whispered, reciting the words like a vow. "Not because you are useful, not because you are beautiful, but because you are the only person who ever saw me in the dark and didn't run away." Tears spilled over my lashes. "James, say yes," he pleaded softly, resting his forehead against mine. "Say yes to the man, not the Don." "Yes," I choked out. "Yes, 1,000 times." He didn't kiss me immediately. He just held me. He held me like I was the most precious thing in the world, fragile and unbreakable all at once. "Tomorrow," he said, "we will rebuild the board. We will secure the city. We will deal with the Russians." "Tomorrow," I agreed. "But tonight?" He swept me up into his arms, bridal style. I gasped, clinging to his shoulders. He carried me toward the bedroom, walking past the glass walls that showed our city, our kingdom, glittering below. "Tonight," he finished, "the king worships his queen." I rested my head on his shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. The disguise was ash. The danger was outside. And I was exactly where I belonged, in the arms of the monster who loved me.